Welcome to Decision Point, a podcast about overcoming adversity in sales and the growth that we experience in the process. I'm Brad Seaman. So first off, I saw you went to Miami. Is that right?
That's right, Miami, Ohio.
Okay. Are you from the Midwest?
I'm from Cincinnati. Yeah.
Okay. So you're right. That was pretty close to home then.
That's right.
So how'd you end up in Arizona?
It's funny. So after Miami, I actually shipped out to Seattle, Washington. I was out there for a couple years, and then about 3 years after Seattle, I moved down to Scottsdale, Arizona, with my past employer, SAP, and I've been here ever since.
All right. Well, how did you guys get in? So tell me a little bit about Pidgi, right?
Sure.
You get the name? Okay. Tell me a little bit about the business. Tell me kind of how you guys got to the business model and kind of walk me through what you guys do.
Sure. So how we started, essentially when I was a sales rep at SAP Concur, it was harped on leadership to be finding and selling to our past users and buyers, right? So we're looking for VP of finance, CFOs, AP managers that have used our tool, both in the travel and expense and the invoice side, that have moved to different companies, right? And at scale, when a company has 40,000 customers, that's a lot of end users to kind of track and monitor. So we were doing this completely manual, right? SDRs were doing it manual. We were doing it manual. It's terrible. It's a dreadful process. You have to interface between all these different tools just to get to a lead that might actually not be a former past user. So I went to one of our co-founders' bachelor party, Ben. We were at his bachelor party in Chelan, Washington, and I was chatting with his brother, who was a developer, and just toying with the idea of saying, hey, can we build this? Is this possible? Like, how would this work? So we chatted, and then we met again for Ben's wedding, and I finally recruited him to say, okay, he'll be a partner in this. So Dennis and myself were at this since October of 2021. And in January of 2022, we actually recruited Ben from Amazon to come manage the product full time. So we have a team of 3. And so fast forward to present, we're not bootstrapped, we're customer funded, is what we say. I just got that from another call earlier this morning. I thought that was pretty good. And yeah, now we're in the trenches. We're go to market. We're trying to land our first handful of customers.
So do you think about being bootstrapped and customer funded as being two separate things because you're not putting your own money into it? Or you just like the customer funded?
I actually talked to the CEO, David from Whistle, his SDR outsourcing services, and I'd said that we were bootstrapped, and he said, we like to call that customer funded around here. So I was like, you know what, I think we're going to adopt that. But
that customer funded.
For a while, we were pretty bootstrapped, which out of our pocket.
Now, do you have plans on raising money, or are you guys going to try to stay customer funded?
We do, yes. It's in the plans. We're going to see how we can do for another quarter. We kind of like the idea of being scrappy and just experimenting with things. But yeah, it's an ongoing conversation, and we'll see what the market trends are. But we're having conversations with VCs, and there's definitely some interest there. It's just us really, I guess, turning it on, if you will.
Yeah, I think the big thing is trying to focus or kind of think around, how are you in a winner take all market is a big thing, because I think most markets are not winner take all. I think there's plenty of space. If you look at most of the B2B software space market, I do not think is winner take all. And then you got to kind of ask yourself, like, okay, what are you bringing the unique to the table? And, if you have, I think I think a lot of companies go out and try to raise money when they really just have people and process problems. And they and it just makes the problems that they had worse by throwing more money on it. So I've been in both scenarios. The company I had before this one, we raised a ton. It felt like a ton of money to us. When you see rounds at like $120 million, it's not a lot, but we raised a lot of money, and it just really compounded issues that we had. So let me ask you this: so how'd you get into sales? What was your trajectory coming out of Miami of Ohio?
I think coming out of Miami, Ohio. So the first company that I worked for is a company called Brooksource. It's an IT recruiting firm based out of
Yeah,
Indianapolis.
it's an indie company.
Yeah, and I just connected with the first manager that actually ever hired me. It just felt like a fit. We talked, I think, for an extra 30 minutes than our scheduled time, and it just felt, it just felt like
So did
it
you
felt
know
like a
you were going
fit.
to go into the sales space, or you weren't sure at that point?
I wasn't sure. I was kind of one of those college kids that was just like, I'm not really sure where I want to land, but I was extremely attracted to technology, B2B SaaS. And I actually had told the manager that hired me in Cincinnati, I said, look, I want to be in Seattle within 12 months. Or actually, I'm sorry, I want to move out of Cincinnati within 12 months. What are my options? He said, well, we're planning on opening an office in Dallas and Seattle. So bust your ass. We'll see where you're at. And then we can see, what office fits best for you. And then sure enough, it was about 18-month mark I was in Seattle.
Now, did you like your time in Seattle?
I loved it. Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, look, I'm a Midwest kid. I went to, big city, right there on the water. Yeah, I had a great time. Met awesome friends, and pretty much launched my career.
And now what's that? Anyways, I got a lot of geographical questions, but we'll keep going down this. So who's a good fit on your? So when you think about your product, you could probably fit it in about anywhere. In terms of anybody that's selling needs to know where people have moved. Where
Mhm.
are you guys finding traction?
We're finding traction on the marketing side and the sales development side, right? Sales development, that's obviously can be a brutal role. They're asked to do a lot, especially on the manual research and prepping of lists and finding the right people to reach out to. And we can kind of aggregate some of that data and consolidate it into a single interface. So they could say, hey, I found these 20 people that have changed jobs in my territory. This is easy pickings for me to call today and maybe through the end of the week, right? But also on the marketing side, we're seeing traction from, outbound folks that are doing email newsletters because we were told in that, some companies are finding out that people are changing jobs based on the bounce backs they get from their
Yeah.
newsletter. So that's a pretty reactive way to look at things, right? So there's definitely been some outbound interest from the marketing team and CMOs as well.
Now, are you going out to the internet and finding? Are you leveraging kind of online resources to figure out if somebody's moved?
Yeah, so kudos to the product team, Ben and Dennis. Ben has some experience with machine learning back at his Amazon days. So they basically built this machine learning model that aggregates a lot of sources from the internet, career resume sites, LinkedIn, Google API, and we basically just create this high-level funnel that really narrows down within Pidgey. So by the time it gets to the end user, it's let's run and gun.
Now, how'd you come up with Pidgey? Pidgey
I get
sounds
asked
like
that
a
question a
nickname
lot.
your grandma might call. I feel like that might be like a nickname your grandma might call you.
Yeah. Well, I came on it because B2B SaaS. I was looking for a name that's one word, easy, it sticks, and I don't know what came across, but one of my buddies had mentioned he said the word Pidgey, um, and he just spelled it with the I, and so I quickly checked that the domain was available, and Pidgey.io sounded really nice off the tongue, and I was like, I'm going with it.
Now, did you do this like right? So there's so many like little things to kind of zoom in on about this story that I think are funny. One, you're at a bachelor party and there's all these bachelor things going on, and you're like, "Hey, come over here. What do you think about this business model?" It was really funny. And then the fact that you're Googling Pidgey, did you do it right in front of him, or you said it, you immediately got your phone out?
Yeah, it was over chat. It was over chat. I was like, oh, that sounds slick. And I knew I wanted a .io in the domain name. I was like, man, this could be perfect. And then, yeah, boom, had it.
I was at so Sales Loft used to do a conference, or Kyle Porter and a couple of guys down in Atlanta used to do a conference called it wasn't Unbound. It was basically like the Unbound conference that HubSpot does, but they did it for outbound. I can't remember what they called it. But anyways, I went down to it, and the guy that spoke's name's Alan Nance. And he did if I knew what he was going to talk about, I would have sponsored the whole weekend. But he primarily talked about outbound, and he used the word all bound. So he said, "Hey, there's all this." He's like, if I hear one more person say inbound's better than outbound, this guy owned a big email marketing company. He said, "I'm going to lose my mind." But what his point was is like, hey, to be successful in sales, it's not one or the other. It's all of the things. you got to do all the things that drive in leads. You got to do inbound. You got to do outbound. You got to do stuff on LinkedIn. You got to have an inbound. You got to have an outbound sales team. There's not one thing. You got to do all the things. And I look down. There's a guy from Arizona named Scott, and he's sitting there Googling it on his phone. And he bought the domain Allbound, and then he built a company on the name Allbound.
Pretty successful company.
Pretty successful company. So yeah, he was sitting. I can't remember Scott's last name, but I looked right at him, and he was like sitting there on his phone, buying it.
Moments like that, they could just come. They just kind of hit you in the wind, and you just got to know to capitalize on it. And I said, you know what? I've been mulling over the name potentials, and all of these suck. I hate them, and this just came. So yeah, I ran with it. But yeah, it's a good story.
So I wish I could. Scott's last name since he's in your backyard.
I don't know, but okay. I know one of the VCs here that has funded his company, so that's how I'm familiar.
Yeah, it's gotten a lot. They've been a success, but no, it is funny because he literally bought it. He bought it right there on site when Alan Nance came up with the word. So I'm going to transition the topic a little bit. You and I got connected on LinkedIn because you talked about outsourcing your sales development, and you really got my gears turning. I came from the business model that I have today is a root of the outsourced appointment setting model. And I have a lot of opinions on it, and I would love to kind of hear your thought and process. And I knew you used the word. I think your post basically said, "Hey, as a startup," and you're you're a first-time founder, right?
That's right.
Okay, so you're out there trying to figure stuff out. So I'd love to kind of hear your, kind of your thoughts on outsourcing, and I can tell you a little bit about mine, and we can sort of walk through this together. But I'd love to. You really got my gears turning. When you brought up that post, and so I made a couple subsequent posts that have probably made some gurus mad. But anyways, I'd love to talk about this subject.
Yeah, let's talk about that subject. So my take is, and it could be from a naive perspective, right? Like I've never hired teams, I've never managed teams, but I've certainly worked on sales teams. And I look back at my career so far, approaching 10 years in actually professional career, right? Some of the best times and some of my best memories and best times as a sales rep has come when I was in the office, sharing that camaraderie, hitting the floor with people, being on the phones, right? And that's very particular to sales and sales SDRs. And as I was writing that post out, I'm coming across a lot of SDR kind of outsourcing companies on LinkedIn. Some seem to be better than others, and I've talked to some of the founders. And I love the idea of outsourcing to a company that has 15 SDRs on the floor. They're being led by, a 20, 25-year sales vet who's been there, done that, and is there to kind of, get the troops rallied, let's hit the phones, let's talk, let's kind of have that banter, because sales and SDRs, they need that, right? It's very hard to get jazzed on the phone, sitting in your second bedroom to dial 50 calls, a day. That's hard.
No, you do. You do now. I've been having conversations with people just about this very subject about being, about sales, the fact that we've really lost sales culture. And one of my first memories, I kind of have two memories that really shaped my business career. Both of them came from a call center experience. So my dad owned a call center. They did lead generation for a mortgage company. So in order to I'd go to his office after school. And I also was the night DJ on the night shift. So I had to run the call center software. I think I was officially the call center manager, but I thought I was a DJ because I got to play all the music. So at night there was maybe, I don't know, 200 or 300 night shift reps. And I'd like crank up the music and get everybody all jazzed up to call California. And the other memory I had was when I wasn't the night shift DJ, to get to my dad's office, I had to go up to the sales room. And I remember walking on the floor, and there's probably 10, 15 guys selling. And there was Phil and Ryan. Ryan was a girl, and that might have been why I was down there, because she had just graduated college, and I'm like a senior in high school, and I thought she was really cute. So I think part of the reason why I might have been hanging out there was because of her. But there are all these guys that I learned to sell from because I sat there and listened to them. I'm there, and there's a big whiteboard, and they're putting their numbers up there. And I'm totally a distraction to the sales manager because I'm the owner's kid, and I'm trying to hang out in the sales meeting. But that's really where I learned to sell. And I got my initial experiences, and eventually they'll let me pick up the phone and I'll sell a deal before I go off to college. But I learned from these guys. And since we've moved virtual, that's really been pulled out of a lot of sales cultures, is that camaraderie. And I don't know that all sales is team sport or is team oriented, but I definitely think software sales is. It's tribal, it's fraternal, it's something that's shared with other people. One of the best tips I learned from sitting at a co-working space a decade ago, listening to a guy named Matt Moulter pitch. And he was a sales guy or he was a police officer that taught himself to code, that built a software company, and then he sold it. He's a multimillionaire. And he is such a fascinating guy because he decided when he started the company that he wasn't going to pay himself more than a teacher's salary. He bootstrapped the whole company, sold it. He's a multimillionaire. I pick him up for lunch, and I'm like, hey, are you getting a house yet? And he's like, nah, everything out there is too expensive. I'm like, bro, you're like literally like you have more money than tons of like all the software founders we know combined.
I love that.
So, but the point is, I learned from him. He used to say this thing that I learned from sitting there around him, which was, he'd get somebody to the spot. He'd say, Mr. Police Officer, because he sold to police officers. He'd say, if you don't buy this today, if you don't buy my solution, how are you going to solve this problem? And he would just be quiet and they would talk. And, I've used that multiple times throughout my career. I mean, like I said, it was probably a decade ago, but that's something I learned from that tribal experience of sitting next and learning to somebody else. And I really do think we have an interesting road ahead of us when we think about the fact that we pulled that out of most sales cultures have it stripped out. And then the people coming out of college don't know any different. So they don't know that they need that.
Let me tell you, Brad, and they're not going to learn it from scrolling through LinkedIn and reading a bunch of long-winded posts about what to do on the sales call when it's all contradicting each other.
It is all Why is there so much contradicting information?
I don't know. I'm not gonna entertain that. All I can say is, I mean, there's absolutely truth in, to your point, and I did this at Brooksource where I was shadowing, being out on the road all day, doing client drops, shaking hands, just being there, hearing it, seeing the interaction, so much different than doing this, over Zoom. And so back to my previous point on that post is, I'd rather just, pay. I'll pay for the culture. It's not even I'm paying for the meetings booked and the demos. I'll pay for that culture. That's where I kind of looked at it.
Where you were looking at it, yeah. And I think that's a really interesting take. I don't have a. I think a couple people chimed in on one of my posts and felt like I was being anti-outsourcing. I'm not anti-outsourcing. I think one of the challenges that you have as a startup, if you don't know your messaging, it's really hard to hand that off to somebody else because nobody's going to care about you as much as you care about yourself. Your messaging. And so I think one of the reasons that it's frowned upon, and I think you can make it work. And I definitely think there's parts of the cycle that you can pull apart, like email and list creation, and be able to manage those aspects really well in an outsourced perspective. On the phone side, I just think you run the risk, and it has everything to do with who you hire, whether it's in-house or whether you hire somebody internally to do it or you hire somebody externally. Lead generation on the outbound side has to do with people. And either they hire good people or you hire good people, but it's all about the people. And if you can find a firm that has that and I think the risk you run into with an outsourced vendor, if you outsource the appointment setting and lead generation, I think could be that, as long as their clients aren't moving around on them, then you're good. I think there's a little bit of fragility, and it all has to do with who you hire, right? But if their clients are moving around, then it puts pressure on them and they got to move all their people around. And you're only as good as the people setting the appointments for you. And so, if I were in your shoes and I was going to go outsource it, I just, have lots of questions around the recruiting process and client retention, because all those things impact, how they're setting appointments or how the flow's going for you. But I do like the idea around culture. Like, hey, you're outsourcing the culture piece to somebody else. That's an interesting take.
And that's the way that I talked about it with my team, because, you look at our situation, we're not going to go out and get real estate anytime soon, right? So those first couple hires, they are going to be remote. Everyone's going to be in their environment, in their call space, right? And, I was thinking about same rules apply with kind of VC and funding, right? Like, VCs want to come in when they know that you've established your messaging, and they know that their funds are going to put, gas on the fire. And I think the same could apply for, an SDR outsource team. This is the messaging that's working. Here are the ICP. Here are the personas.
Yeah.
Double down on this, and let's see if we can get some, up into the right trajectory.
100%. No, I think that's how I would think about it, because I don't think there's anything wrong. I think the issues become, if you don't know what you want, it's really hard to have somebody else take it over. If I don't know who we're targeting, and if I don't know the ICPs and I don't know the messaging, which I think in your case is based on the product, it's really simple. It's a VP of sales, most likely, maybe an inside sales manager. Your use case is really tight. People have left the company. We need to track them down. I think it's, but hey, we're launching a product. We don't know how what you guys are developing, people are doing by hand. And I think a lot of sales products are like that, is that you've had sales teams that have needed help for years and never got the products they needed. And so a lot of this stuff, there's already a product created for it. It's called some interns and a spreadsheet.
Yeah. And let me pose a different spin on that too. That's completely right. Yeah. And the other spin on there is like, who else needs another marketing tool or a sales tool? I mean, for God's sakes, the place is just saturated, right? So if you have your personas, your messaging, everything's dialed in, why not just multiply that with volume, right? Because we're still a 3-man team. It's an all founding team. I lead sales and business development. I can't be 1,000 places at once. If I know what's working, why not, double down instead of investing in, PPC or some of this other stuff that we just know might not convert because in the space that we're in.
Yeah, for sure. What's the, let me ask you this. What's the one thing that you're like the most passionate about right now? And it could be work, it could be sales, but what's the thing that's getting you up in the morning every day?
I think it's the team for sure. When I first shipped to Seattle with Brooksource, we had a 4 or 5-man team, and we were scrappy. We were extremely scrappy. We were close. We were tight. And now, I went to Concur. I was at a big team, a lot of people moving around. Now I'm back in a team where it's just, there's 3 people. We're on this driver's seat, and let's figure it out. Like that, it's kind of what drives me. Everything else we'll figure out because we have a really good team in place. But just being able to work with my friends and just calling the shots, that's the best part.
Yeah, man, something to be said. David Cummings, who started Pardot, who I'm a really big fan of, he says, the reality is, as a startup founder, there's not a lot of stuff that you're actually in control of. You can't control the economy. I mean, whether you think you can or not, you can't control the economy. You can't control the business atmosphere. You can't control your competitors. You can't control your clients, but you can control who you hire. And I do think an add-on to that I've always thought about that's super important. You can control who you bring on as a client. When you're a software company, that kind of goes out, you can pick people, you can pick who you work with. And I think that's the nice thing about being a founder and doing your own thing, is you get to pick the people around you. And there's something to be said about waking up in the morning and going out working with the people you like and that you want to be around. So, well, this was great, Zack. I appreciate your time coming on. And love having you, and best of luck to Pidgi. And we'll see you around.
Likewise. Thanks for having me, Brad. Chat soon.
Hey, you're welcome.